Hello and welcome to God and Country. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys have had a great week. We have a packed show today here on God and Country. We're going to talk about several different issues, and then we're going to talk about the Gulf of Mexico versus the Gulf of America. I'm looking forward to getting into that conversation. Today in Jackson, Mississippi, they gravelled in, and so the legislators are in session. And so we're going to talk about school choice, state income tax, and we're going to talk about some other issues that have to do with the everyday Mississippian, the everyday legislator. And I just want to mention this as well because this is something else we'll talk about today, because from now until April the 1st, you're going to hear and you're going to see a lot of information about mayoral candidates, people running for aldermen, councilmen. And so all of our city races are up and they are raring to go. And so it's an exciting time to be here in Mississippi. Reed Cooley, good to have you in studio, sir. How you been doing?
Dan, I am splendid. I'm glad to be with you here in Gulfport, Mississippi, just a few miles away from the Gulf of America.
Yeah, whenever Trump mentioned that, talking about the Gulf of America, I like the ring. I like the ring of that. It sounds pretty good in my opinion.
I mean, I can't lie. I agree with you too. But are you really surprised that the conversation's gone this direction? Because there's been talk of Canada and Greenland and all these other places, right? But you don't have to be that good at geography to know that after you get past Canada and Greenland, you can't go a whole lot further north until you get to the North Pole. At that point, you can only go south, right? So I was kind of thinking, okay, these talks of expansionism would have to extend southward. And so this doesn't surprise me one bit. I'm okay with the Gulf of Mexico becoming the Gulf of America. I'll say, though, I don't want actual Mexico becoming a part of America. I don't want the cartels and all that stuff here. I still want that border wall along what is now the Texas-Mexico border.
Yeah,
all the way to California, and I want it to be just as tall as it can be with all the fanciest turrets. I want it to make the Great Wall of China look like a Lego set. But I don't want the wall extending further south or us including all the cartels and all that craziness. But the Gulf of America, I love the ring of it.
Yeah, I do too. And so whenever I saw President-elect Donald Trump say that, and I watched the video, you sent it to me, and so I watched it. I was like, man, that's amazing, and I'm all about it. Let's go Trump, and let's change the name. And I don't know what all that would go into as far as change the name, but I live 5 minutes from the Gulf. Like I live 5 minutes from the Gulf of Mexico. And so I went down there this morning and I took a video, and I want you guys to look at this video. And so I took this video. This is the Gulf of Mexico. And so the tide is out right now. The tide is out very far. And so that's Long Beach is what you're looking at right there, Long Beach, Mississippi. And so that's the Gulf. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to zoom in, and you're going to be able to see straight out. You're going to be able to see an island. So technically speaking, if you look really close, I'm not sure how well you better look, but if you look really close, when I zoomed in, you can see those trees out there. So that is Cat Island. And so technically speaking, the water that you're seeing they call it the Mississippi Sound. Once you get out past the island is whenever it turns into the Gulf of Mexico. And so a lot of people don't understand that. They think that is all the Gulf. And it's the same body of water, right? It's all connected to the Gulf of Mexico. And so, but it's called the Mississippi Sound, but we all call it, the Gulf of Mexico. And so, I would love the name change to the Gulf of America. And so this is another picture. And of course you can see the tide is out. That tide is out a lot today. I mean, I went down there very low tide. And so the water where you see like the sand is a different color and it goes up to the white, that's typically where the water comes up. Typically, the water covers all of that sand that looks like it's wet, and so that's typically water. Matter of fact, if you go back there right now, the tide is coming back in, and so the tide will be all the way back in by late tonight. The tide will be all the way back in, to the to its normal spot. And so I like the sound of Gulf of America, and so let's change the name. Reed, what do we have to do that? I mean, can he just start calling it that?
I think we can pretty much just start calling it that. I can't tell you that I know this is brand new news to me as well. I mean, I'm in favor of it as well, I guess. I don't think that it changes a whole lot, to be honest with you. I think this is something that's going to make a lot of liberal heads explode. And I think that's probably the silver lining in it. It's probably the greatest thing about it altogether. I'll say, yeah, let's take, let's rename the Gulf of America. It's to me, its rightful name. Let's take Canada too. I'm in favor of some sort of annexation of Canada as long as it does not include Quebec. I have nothing against the French Canadians. I just don't want the French language to be a major language in the United States. I just don't. And that comes from a guy who French is my second language, by the way. It doesn't mean I'm some sort of enthusiastic Francophone. I just don't want another language that the English language has to contend with as far as being the dominant language here in the United States. So if we do annex Canada, you're going to see me become a Quebecois nationalist overnight. I'm going to support their independence no matter what it takes. That might be my very cold, stony, Arctic hill to die on, but I might very well die on it.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I don't want to see us annex Canada.
Well, you don't want all those Canadian votes, right? Is that kind of the
That's
argument?
right. Those they'll pick up two senators, two more senators in the Senate. So
Make them a territory, not if you make them a territory.
Well, now I would be okay
like
with
Puerto
that.
Rico.
Okay, I would be okay with that. Making them a territory, and so that way they don't pick up more Senate seats. Because that Canada is not going to vote Republican.
No, absolutely not.
Not maybe in certain pockets. We might pick up a House seat or two. But as far as the Senate's concerned, we wouldn't pick up anything there. Here's another picture, Reed, of the beach area that I was at this morning. That is a Long Beach Harbor, and so actually right there where you see that crane coming up, right there at that where you see that metal roof, that was where my wife and I had one of our very first dates whenever we started dating. And we went there with my parents, and then from there we drove over to Bellingrath Gardens in Alabama. And so this pier that you see, it got destroyed with not the last hurricane, but the hurricane before that. And so they're still trying to get funding, I believe, to fix that pier back. I mean, it needs a lot of work. And so on that, it needs a lot of work on that beach. And here's a picture of that beach, of that pier, and you'll see that it's been destroyed. And I know the water looks ugly, but you can see the bottom right there, and I'm sorry about that.
If we do rename it to Gulf of America, we have to make it a prettier Gulf than it currently is. I'm sorry. Like, I've been to some of the cleanest ocean water in the world. Can we clarify and beautify some of the water, please?
So in order to do that, first I want to see this pier fixed. I would like to see that pier fixed. In order to do that, Reed, a couple things would have to happen to make the water cleaner. One, you would have to get rid of those islands. Cat Island and Ship Island and Horn Island. A lot of those islands would have to. That stops a lot of that ugly debris, a lot of that mud from going back out into the deep water. And so those islands, they don't help us as far as having cleaner water. The other thing, the water, from what I understand, and I'm not a ocean beach expert, but the water would, in some spots, the water would need to be deeper. And so what a lot of people don't know is, if you go back to that video that I showed of Cat Island, if the tide is right and if the tide is out all the way, and if the tide is right, you could almost, in certain spots, walk to that island. The water is not very deep out there. Now, in that they have a trench where the big boats come into the Gulfport Harbor. Of course, that water is 37, or so foot deep, and so that water is very deep. But that Cat Island out from Long Beach, if you get away from where the water's been, where it's been dredged, you could almost walk out there in some spots. Not in all spots, but in some spots you could walk out there very far. And if you're a good swimmer, you could absolutely walk far, swim a little bit, and then walk the rest of the way. And so, but a lot of people don't understand that. But in order to make that dirt or that water cleaner, it would need to be deeper. And then those islands would have to be done away with, so that water, that tide comes in, that tide goes out, and it brings out all that mud and it brings out all that filth out into the deep water in order to make that water cleaner. And so there would have to be a lot that goes into that, to make it a cleaner water. Now, the beach is pretty. I love the beach. They do a lot of work on the beach, and the county here, Harrison County, they do a lot of work on the beach, and they have a crew that works on the beach nearly every day, as long as the weather's permitting, down there, cleaning the sand, just making sure that the beach stays, beautiful, and they do a really good job. And our supervisors here in Harrison County, they do a really good job, in making sure that beach stays clean and pristine.
But it's just a matter of geography, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we were in Florida, we would have if Florida water, as far as like the way that water was over here, we'd have the same as far as the cleanness or the clear of the water. That's why if you go out to Ship Island, the water gets a lot cleaner and a lot more clear. And whenever you go out past, Ship Island and even Cat Island, once you get out a little bit, you'll notice really quick the water gets clear and you can see pretty deep down into the water. It's that very clear blue water that you would see, over in Florida. And so it's I'm going to start calling it the Gulf of America.
Yep.
And so that's what I'm calling it from now on. It is no longer the Gulf of Mexico to me. It is now the Gulf of America. Excuse me. It is now the Gulf of America. And so that is how we will, talk about the Gulf from now on. And
well,
so
this not only means that the Gulf of Mexico loses the Gulf of Mexico as the name of this Gulf, but means the only Gulf they have left is the Gulf of California on the other side. So that's kind of a double whammy to them.
Yeah, I'm for it. Hey, thanks for tuning in to God and Country. We appreciate all of you watching. And if you haven't already shared, I would encourage you to do so, and that'll help us. So read today, the legislators in Mississippi and the legislators in a lot of states are going back to the Capitol. And so I really, I want to bring up something that I think is important, that people need to understand. And this might not be the case for everyone, but a lot of people, this is the case. It is a great sacrifice, for a lot of these senators and the House reps, to go to Jackson. They're going to be there for the next 3 to 4 months. And many of them are there doing very good work, for the state, whether it's Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, whatever state that they're from, they're there doing really good work for their state. We have people in Jackson and Louisiana or Baton Rouge that are fighting for what we would consider and what we call conservative values. And I put out an article yesterday and I emailed it out, and it was about, people running for office, and it was about conservative issues. And I heard somebody say to me this the other day, Reed, I want to bring up this. Someone said to me about a council seat. It doesn't matter really, if this person that is running for city council is pro-life or pro-choice. As long as they have the conservative, the conservative ideas that we have whenever it comes to taxes and whenever it comes to business, then they're okay. My response to that, Reed, is if I have somebody that is pro-life, that is pro-business, that is getting rid of taxes, that is for cutting red tape, versus somebody that is pro-choice, and they might have the same other things as the other person, but they're pro-choice, I'm going with the pro-life person.
Right. At the very least, it's a good tiebreaker.
Absolutely. And because I don't want to give somebody that is pro-choice, I don't want to give them any type of foothold anywhere in any city. And so I'm always going to go with the person that is the most conservative.
Right. I don't want to bolster the political career of someone who's going to be pro-choice, or as we should more accurately call it, anti-life or anti-baby, anti-birth. I don't want to bolster that person's political career and make them a better contender for a subsequent even higher office down the road. And just as you and I have said before, whenever you have a bad view on an issue like abortion, which a lot of people don't consider to be a serious issue at all, it really does signal a serious lack of judgment that will inevitably spill over into other issue areas.
Absolutely. I agree. And so you need to be really careful, whenever it comes to who you're going to back for mayor, who you're going to back for council, alderman. That's very important. And that's one reason, Reed, why I say this all the time, whenever it comes to, people running for office, and that is that your vote counts. And so it's so important that you and I are involved in it, we are engaged, but it's also very important that we get out and vote, because your vote does count. And so it is important that you research, these candidates. Whenever people are going to run for mayor, run for city council, run for alderman, it is important that you research them on the issues. Whenever it comes to taxes in your city, they can't just raise the taxes. They have to send it to Jackson, and Jackson has to vote on it. But most of the time, if a city asks for a tax increase, most of the time, the legislator will vote for it if that's what the council are wanting to do. And so you need to ask those questions. Where do you stand out on taxation? Where do you stand whenever it comes to growth in the city? Whenever it comes to annexation, some cities in Ocean Springs, they just annexed a large part of the county. Those are questions that you need to be asking. Where do you stand whenever it comes to law enforcement? That is something that is very important. And back to the same whenever it comes to these counties, because, like you take the beach, we're talking about the beach a while ago. That beach is ran not by the cities, but the beach is ran by the Board of Supervisors. So that beach, that beach, the safety of the beach goes back to the sheriffs. The cleanliness of the beach goes back to the board of supervisors. And so that's why it's important for you and I to learn, what do these people do in these seats? So whether it's council, alderman, mayor, and then also not just what do they do in these seats, but how is the government set up, in these seats? What is the difference between a strong mayor and a weak mayor? What is the difference between a mayor that has aldermen and a mayor that has councilmen? And a lot of people don't understand. Maybe we'll talk about that, whenever it gets closer. But those are very important questions that you and I need to be asking, especially over the next several weeks as these candidates are picking up their race as far as mayor and as far as running for alderman or councilman. It's so important that you know the issues and that you get informed, as a people. And so, but back to the legislators in Jackson, the legislators in Baton Rouge, the legislators in all of our these capitals across, America, it's important that you are plugged in and you know what's happening and going on in your capital, in your state. So many times, Reed, the national politics takes up, all of our time. It takes up all of the news, and people just aren't informed, and they don't know what's going on in the country. In their state. And so you have to be involved, you have to be engaged and know what's going on. So Reed, let's talk about an issue, school choice. School choice is something that's going to be brought up here in Mississippi in the legislature. I'm going to a lunch in February that talks about that talks about school choice. And I'm a very big I'm in favor of school choice for many reasons. But Reed, what are your thoughts about school choice?
Well, I mean, in general, I'm extremely in favor of school choice. I think that even if we did have a successful, if we could theoretically, in some alternate universe where this is even possible, if we did have a successful public school program, theoretically, I would still be in favor of school choice. It's not simply a matter of the fact that, the very real fact that public schooling has failed this country so miserably that we have kids leaving school, questioning their gender, wanting to get all these kinds of ridiculous surgeries, leaving as little more than government drones. I think it's just a matter of, it's a natural right for parents to be able to choose how and where they educate their own children. So, I mean, school choice, it's absolutely something that I'm in favor of. And I'm really happy to see that, I would say since about 2019, school choice has slowly become a sort of third rail in American politics, right behind like abortion and other cultural issues, because parents are seeing exactly what it is that I'm sure you've seen plenty of with the public school system, which is just the absolute abject failure coming out of a system that was never really designed to succeed. The public school system was never designed to make our kids successful or more qualified or more capable or more independent thinkers. It was never designed to make leaders out of them. We are a few generations downstream from the effects of that. The effects of that have seeped in, a bit more than I would have liked, obviously. But I think that school choice would be an absolutely wonderful thing for this country. I think it's an inevitable development that's going to come. It's picked up so much steam in other states. So I'm enthusiastically in favor of it, and I'm sure you are too.
So I do like school choice for a lot of reasons. I just like freedom, and I think that parents are to have the freedom, to do with what their tax money. If they choose to put their child in a private school, then I think that their tax money ought to follow their children to their private school. I will say this about, where my children go to school. My children go to, a public school here in Harrison County at West Harrison Elementary, West Harrison Middle School, and then West Harrison High School. Now, West Harrison is an awesome school. It's an awesome school. I mean, the kids, they're doing very well, and they enjoy it very much, and they have some great teachers, very good teachers. Their principal, my daughter's principal, was one of my teenagers whenever he was in my youth group back many years ago. Just a bright, brilliant, smart young man. And in the case can be said about my daughter who's in 8th grade and my two boys who are in high school. They have a great principal, very strong Christian man, and all of their teachers. Fortunately for us, all of their teachers are really good Christian, either men or women, which is a really good thing. My boys play football, and their football coach is a fine Christian man who has prayer and devotions, with the team more than once a week, 3 or 4 times a week. Very strong. and he's very involved in the children's life. Unfortunately, that's not the case in every public school. Unfortunately, not every child gets to attend, a public school like my children get to attend. And I'm thankful for the school that we send our children to. I'm thankful for the teachers. Let me just say this. There are some public schools that I would not send my children to. There's no way. But I'll say this as well. There are some private schools that I would not send my children to.
Absolutely.
Even though that they are considered private school. There are some Christian schools that I would not send my children to. And so just like there's some public schools that I wouldn't go to, the same as there's some private schools that I wouldn't go to, and there are some Christian schools that I wouldn't go to. It's kind of like eating at a Mexican restaurant. There are some Mexican restaurants that I will eat at every single day of my life if I could. Los Tres Amigos there in Slidell, Louisiana, I eat there all the time, and I would go there every day if I could. Pepe's in D'Iberville, Mississippi. Listen, I go there. I try to go there every Friday if I can. I would go to Pepe's every day if I could. If I was in that area for lunch, that's where I'm going, and I'm going to get their shrimp, their bowl of shrimp, and cheesy. It's called cheesy shrimp, and if you go to Pepe's, get it. It's amazing. It's awesome. But there are some Mexican restaurants, Reed, that I will not go to, and the case can be said for like going to a bathroom, going to a restaurant, going to a store. There are some stores that we stay away from. There are some stores that we go to. There are some restaurants that we go to. There are some restaurants that we stay away from. And the same could be said, I guess, about every area of life. There are some churches that I wouldn't go to.
Right.
There are some churches that I wouldn't attend. And there are some Baptist churches, and I'm a Baptist pastor, and there are some Baptist churches that I wouldn't go to because they're bad churches, and there's bad leadership in those churches. I'm not going to go to a militant type church. And where the pastor, I wrote an article about this about 2 weeks ago, where the pastor's a militant, where he wants to try to control everybody's life, and he wants to try to tell everybody how they should or shouldn't live their life. You have a Bible, you have a Holy Spirit, you need to walk with God personally. And so I'm not going to attend certain types of churches. I'm going to stay away from them. The same is said about schools. And I said a lot there to come back to. I'm thankful that for the school that my children get to go to, but not every child gets to go to that type of a school. And Reed, that's why I'm for school choice.
Well, I have to stop and study this bewildering anomaly that seems to be the western half of Harrison County, because every government service you have seems to work perfectly. Like, I think this is the only place I've ever heard of where people talk about how every government service works properly. I have this question. Is there a government service here that doesn't work properly, or is it all just rainbows everywhere you go?
Well, I'm not going to call it rainbows because we have
not rainbows like that, but you get the point.
we have our issues, we have our problems. But listen, living on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, we've been blessed, and God has truly blessed this area, and I'm thankful for our area, and I'm thankful for the leadership that we have here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Whenever it comes to mayors and councilmen and our supervisors, and I'm really close. Fortunately, I'm really close, to several of our supervisors here that sits on the board. And one of them is one of my best friends, in all the world. And we talk every single day. We text or on the phone every single day together. We work together, and so on several different issues. And so God has really blessed, the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Now, I will say this, that the Mississippi Gulf Coast is going to go through a major change this year when it comes to elections. You look at Long Beach. The mayor of Long Beach, Mayor George Bass, good Christian man. And he is retiring. He's not going to be running for re-election. And so Long Beach is going to get a new mayor. Gulfport, Mayor Billy Hughes is retiring. He's not going to be running again for mayor. He's a good man. And so have I always agreed with Mayor Bass and Mayor Hughes on every issue? Absolutely not. And so it's just part of life. But they're good men, and they've done a good job. And so, but they're going to be retiring. And so I believe that we're going to have some people step up to the plate that's going to do a great job as mayor of Gulfport and mayor of Long Beach. And there's going to be some other mayors and some other council and aldermen along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But God has been really good. Now, there are some and I don't want to. There are some schools in Harrison County that I wouldn't send my kids to. I just wouldn't. I'd be very careful about where I send my children to school. I'm a very protective father, I guess you could say. But where they're at, God has been good, and I'm so thankful to get to live here, and raise my children here. And it's not like a lot of other places. But Reed, going back to school choice, that's why I'm for school choice. Is because if I lived in a district that had a failing school, which, by the way, Harrison County, the West Harrison High School was voted the number one high school in the state of Mississippi the last 3 years in a row. And so that's where my two boys go to school at. It's the number one high school, the state of Mississippi, 3 years in a row. Very, very good schools whenever it comes to education. But not every child gets to live in a school district like that. And so that's where school choice would come into play. And so if I was living in a school district that was failing, and there was a private school there or a Christian school there that I could send my children to, well, what happened with school choice is I would fill out that paperwork, and then that money that I'm paying to the state, that my taxes, my tax money would then follow my children to that private school. And so what would happen is a parent that could not afford that private school or that Christian school, they want to get their children out of that failing school district. And so now, because of school choice, I can now afford to put my children in a private school that is passing, or a public school that is, a Christian school that is doing well. So that benefits my children. But Reed, you know what that's going to do? Competition breeds excellence. And so these public schools that are failing, they are going to step up to the plate and start doing a better job for the kids so they don't lose a bunch of kids. And that tax money doesn't follow those kids, to another school. The same goes with these private and Christian schools. Now they're going to step up to the plate. Because there's some people that send their kids to certain private schools, but they would send them to another private school if they could afford it. And so now these private schools and Christian schools are going to have to step up to the plate and start doing a better job. So who wins is our children. That's who wins, is our children win. And Reed, this ought to be about the children. It ought to be about the children. And unfortunately, many times it's politics. It's politics. It's you vote for me, or if it's this lobbyist doesn't want this, and these people don't want this, and at the end of the day, it needs to be about the children.
It's teachers unions. Teachers unions are really the biggest enemy here.
Yeah, I would agree. And Mississippi doesn't have teachers. I think it's against the law in Mississippi to have what we consider a teachers union.
So you mean to say like the American Federation of Teachers under Randy Weingarten actually doesn't have an influence in our state?
No, I'm not going to say that they don't have an influence.
Okay.
But what I would say is a so-called teachers union. I don't think we have a so-called teachers union. I'm not going to say that there's not an influence, because there is. There's still a very large, and I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that. But I know that there's a very large teachers organizations. They just don't call themselves teachers unions, to where they come in and they have influence. And I know a lot of these teachers are not going to want. They're not going to want school choice, and some of them have been fed a lie, about school choice. It's going to affect our schools. It's going to hurt our schools. No, it's going to help our schools. It's going to help them. And then let's talk about the money for a few moments. Let's talk about the money. So Florida, in the state of Florida, Reed, they have 69 school districts in the state of Florida. You want to guess how many school districts Mississippi has?
At least twice that.
We have 152. 152 school districts in Mississippi. So, Reed, let me ask you this question. Do you know how many children those 69 school districts in Florida, how many children that they help, that they service?
Not right offhand, Dad. I can't say that I do.
It's right. I got it written down. It's right at 2.8 million. It's almost 2.9 million children. And these numbers obviously will fluctuate. Mississippi has 442,000. 442,000 versus 2.8, almost 3 million. The state of Florida has as many children in their schools as we have in our entire state. But yet they have 69 school districts. We have 152 school districts. So I think that how we can find some more money, for these schools would be to eliminate some of these school districts. Reed, why do we have 152 school districts?
It sounds like a very top-down approach to just what's a bureaucracy in our education system. That's what it seems like. And so to break those numbers down a little bit more, just to simplify them, even though Florida has about 7 times as many students, they have less than half as many districts as we do. And that's utterly mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And so whenever you look at that, if you was to eliminate some of those school districts, so that's a lot more money that can go into the classroom. That's a lot more money that can go into getting more teachers, maybe putting another 2 or 3 teachers in some of these classes, dividing up some of these classes, so the children can have more help, more teachers, and that's what the children need. And so that's just one of the areas. We have 82 counties in Mississippi, and I'm going to say this: not every county should even have a school, should even be their own school district. But I mean, even if you just eliminated from 152 down to 82 would be a huge step. But some of these counties, you could put them in with other counties.
Right.
There's just not a lot of people, especially in the Delta area. There's just not a lot of people. And they really, whenever it comes to education, the Delta area really needs help whenever it comes to our schools. It's just a fact. It's just how it is. In Harrison County, we have 5 school districts in Harrison County. And so now we're one of the largest counties, but 5 school districts, we could break that down, to 2 or 3 school districts. And so what'd happen is that'd be more money going back into the classroom. That'd give our teachers, you give them a pay raise, you can add more. There's a lot of things that you can do whenever you start eliminating, some of these districts. You don't have to pay rent on as many buildings. You don't have to pay as many light bills, not as many salaries. I mean, there's just so much money that goes into having 152 school districts that you could put a lot more money back into the classroom and back into our teachers, which I think, Reed, would be very important. And so whenever it comes to our children, the education of our children, and that ought to be something that is very important. I know one thing that the Trump administration has talked about, and that was eliminating the education system here in America as far as the federal education system and sending it back locally, back, to the states. And Reed, that is something else that I would love to see happen.
Right. You're talking about Trump's promise to abolish the Department of Education.
Correct. Yes.
So you do know whenever the Department of Education was founded, right?
Yeah.
That was one of Jimmy Carter's creations. We had education before the late 1970s, did we not?
I'm pretty sure we did, and probably really good.
And that's just another one of the confusing myths that liberals love to inflict upon us, is that in order to have something in this country, you have to have a federal government department dedicated specifically to whatever that is. And the fact of the matter is, test scores, GPAs, America's educational competitiveness, particularly in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, they've all gone down precipitously ever since the so-called Department of Education was founded under the late Jimmy Carter. So, I think that being able to unshackle our children from all of this administration, all this bureaucracy, all this this fat cat nonsense happening at the upper levels of this just unnecessary bureaucracy we have, I think it's going to be an absolutely amazing development for the next generation of Americans.
Yeah, I agree. And Reed, I want to stop right here and just mention once again and say thank you to all of you that have subscribed, to God and Country and to the Midnight Ride. And many of you watch, Reed and I here on God and Country. You watch Chris McDaniel and Jack Fairchild or Jim there on the Midnight Ride. I want to say thank you. And you helped make 2024 a great year. We're looking forward to a very strong 2025 here on God and Country. So if you haven't already subscribed, I would encourage you to do so. If you haven't already shared this podcast, shared the Facebook page or the YouTube channel, with your family, I would encourage you to do so. And I want to stop right here and just take a moment and put this plug, because this is something that I think is so very important, and that is that your vote counts. And especially as we have all of these city races, coming up here in 2025, just how important. And as we talk about school choice and we talk about the legislators, in Jackson, once again, your vote counts. It comes in mind, because all of these votes and all of these bills that are coming out, they're coming out from people that have been voted in. And so by us. And so it's important that we get out and vote. And especially here in 2025 for your council, for mayor, for alderman, and then, of course, leading into 2026, there'll be federal elections. And then 2027, there'll be statewide elections. There'll be your sheriffs. There'll be all of your supervisors. And so all of those races could be coming up. Speaking of your vote counts, I want to bring up one thing really quick, and then we'll jump into the last conversation, for today, is the Public Service Commission, because there's some talk in Jackson about eliminating, not eliminating the Public Service Commission, but eliminating the fact how that person is elected. And so there are some people in Jackson that would love to make that an appointed position by the governor. And so they want to give that power, to the governor. So the governor would appoint, the 3 public service commissioners. Right now in Mississippi, we have a Southern Public Service Commissioner, we have a Central Public Service Commissioner, and then we have a Northern Public Service Commissioner. And these commissioners, they regulate, utilities. That's what they do. They regulate utilities, whether it's phones, for an example, your power, electricity, gas. I mean, all of those type of things. That is what the Public Service Commissioner does. He regulates utilities. And so they were first started whenever it was regulating the railroad. That's one of the main reasons the Public Service Commission was started, was to regulate the railroads. And so there's some talk in Jackson about eliminating how this person is or becomes a Public Service Commissioner. Right now, they are voted in by the people. In 2027, if things stay like they are, there'll be an election, and the people will vote in the Public Service Commissioner. And so the Public Service Commissioners are voted in by the people, and so they answer to the people. And so you got to understand something, that the Public Service Commissioners, they regulate utilities. Now, the power companies are some of the largest companies in the world. Dealing with power. Everybody buys power. You're watching this because of electricity. And so it's very important to have somebody in that seat that answers to the people. And so if we change that, then the Public Service Commissioners are appointed instead of voted in. If we change that, then they don't answer to the people. They answer to the governor. Now, you would say, well, the governor answers to the people. You're right, the governor does answer to the people. But I would much rather have 4 people that are elected by the people that answer to the people, the governor, and then your 3 Public Service Commissioners. I would much rather have 4 people that answer to the people instead of 1 person that answers to the people. It would be easier to get rid of the 1 or 2 of the 4 than it is to get rid of the 1. And so just keep that in mind as we're begin to hearing conversations, come out of Jackson about a lot of different bills and a lot of different things that are going to be coming up. Just keep all of those things in the back of your mind. I like whenever the people get to vote. I like the people having a say. And so, Reed, I just wanted to mention that because there's so much conversation. There are conversations that are being had about the Public Service Commission and about how they want to take that vote away from the people. I had an organization a couple years ago. It was called Let Mississippi Vote. And I'm a strong believer in the vote of the people and letting the people vote. As you can see, I talk about this every single show. Reed, there's not one show on my channel that you can go find where I don't mention your vote counts. Every single one. I mention your vote counts because I believe truly that your vote does count. Reed, do you believe that the people's vote should count?
I know for a fact that it does because I've worked on no telling how many elections that were as close as it gets, and I can tell you a lot of these big consequential races can be decided by as little as a few dozen votes. Actually, it only takes 1 vote to win, if we're being honest. So, yeah, I know for a fact it counts.
Yeah, and there have been some votes that have won because of 1 vote, and so that's important. The last thing I want to talk about is and maybe there'll be some other things that we'll talk about, in this show, but that stem from this one thing that I want to bring up. But over the course of the over the course of the next couple months, we'll be talking about a lot of different bills, especially once bills, we start seeing the bills and we start seeing them get debated on the floor, and then they go to committee, and we'll start talking about, these bills, and we'll point out these bills and, and these House bills and Senate bills, and we'll show you on the screen and look at the language of these bills. But one thing that I want to see eliminated in Mississippi, and the legislature has done some work. They have done some work in the last session, and that is on our state income tax. And, Reed, one thing that I would love to see is the state income tax fully eliminated. And I know some people don't like it whenever I say this, but the truth is this: we give way too much money to the government. We give way too much money to the government, whether it's Mississippi, or to Washington, D.C., and a lot of money goes there that I wish stayed in our pockets. I think I know how to spend my money much better than they do. And whenever I see them sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, talking about the federal government, whenever I see them doing useless things sometimes, even in our own state, I think that money should have stayed with the people. If we can afford to give billions of dollars to Ukraine, Reed, we can afford to give people tax breaks right here in Mississippi, right here in Louisiana, right here in Alabama, Texas, right here in our country. If we can afford to give so much money overseas and so much money on useless programs, we can give the people here a tax break.
Well, did you see 1.35 billion in like equity spending or something like that from DHS? While there are people in the western half of North Carolina who had their property destroyed by the hurricanes of late last year, and they're still being forced to pay property taxes on property that has been completely and totally decimated. They can't use it for any purpose or anything like that. So yeah, I 100% agree. I think abolishing the state income tax is a ridiculously modest start to where I would like to begin whenever it comes to eliminating all these ridiculous taxes. When we talk about the concept of an income tax, this is another bit of tyranny springing out of the progressive era during the time of Woodrow Wilson. Whenever you talk about the president that signed into law the income tax, it was Woodrow Wilson, 1913. Very bad year for liberty. That was not only the year that the income tax was created, that was also the year that the Federal Reserve was established. We'll get to the Federal Reserve another time. But when we talk about the application of the income tax in Mississippi, that's just an extension of the progressive era of the early 20th century, which was an attempt to completely and totally overthrow the original vision of this country by the Founding Fathers. Read some of Woodrow Wilson's letters, where he talks about what he thinks about the Founding Fathers. Woodrow Wilson was very open with his disdain for the Founding Fathers, about how he thought they were ignorant, he thought they were backwards, he thought they couldn't be trusted, he thought they were immoral, he thought they were depraved, he thought all these other horrible things about the Founding Fathers. And the income tax came as a result of him and his administration and the work that his ilk did to try and overthrow the original vision of this country, which they very nearly succeeded in. If we're being honest, looking at what happened throughout the 20th century, beginning from 1913 onward, all the way up until the present day here in the 21st century, I think it's very fair to say that the progressive era, the movement, the ideological movement that gave birth to things like the income tax, did very nearly destroy the original vision of this country. So I think that the income tax needs to be obviously repealed in Mississippi. It needs to be repealed on the federal level. Every state needs to get rid of it. And we need to remember it as another failed experiment of a failed ideology, which is progressivism, and we should never allow it to seep back into our culture, back into our politics, back into our education system. That's it.
I agree. Getting rid of the state income tax, getting rid of the federal tax. People say, well, where's the government going to get their money from for all of these programs? Well, you eliminate some of these programs.
We need to have fewer programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Fewer government. We don't need more government. We need less government.
We had roads and bridges before 1913, the income tax, just like we had education before Jimmy Carter established the Department of Education.
Yeah, and so when you look at your money, you'll get your check Friday or every 2 weeks or deposited, and you'll see on there how much taxes you paid to the state, how much taxes you paid, to the federal. And then at the end of the year, you're going to get another tax bill, and it's going to be your property taxes if you're a property owner, and you're going to pay taxes on your property. And then you're going to go to the gas station, to get gas. In Mississippi, you're going to pay 18 cents on the gallon for gas. Then you're going to go out to eat, and you're going to pay a tax on that. Then you're going to go maybe get a motel room somewhere, and you're going to pay tax on that. You're going to go buy your kids clothes. You're going to get taxed on that. One weekend a year, you get a non-tax on school supplies where you can go and you don't have to pay taxes. That ought to be every weekend. And then you go buy a gun. There's one weekend a year, I think, where you can buy gun and ammos without taxes. They ought to be every year. And so my point is, there are so many taxes that we are paying with already taxed money. It's unbelievable. And I know that, Reed, that we have legislators in Jackson that would love to eliminate the state income tax. I know that because I've had conversations with them. I've talked to them. And and let me just say this, there's a majority there is a majority of people in Jackson that would love to eliminate the state income tax. And so I know that this session that they're going to be doing work on that particular thing. And Reed, I want to have some legislators on, throughout the session and
Absolutely.
talk about, some of these bills, that's happening and going on. And so, which I think is very important. And so I know they're working to eliminate the state income tax, and I know that they want to. And I really hope that between the House and the Senate, between those two chambers, that they can come up with a good compromise between those two to eliminate the state income tax, to implement school choice, and to keep the Public Service Commission as it is right now voted in. And so, Reed, every week from now until end of session, we'll be talking about different policy issues that's coming up. And I really hope that we can really educate people on policy. I would like to have a legislator on, and I know that they'll come on and talk about how difficult it is just to get a bill through. It's not easy. I mean, it is hard work, to get a bill to be passed into law, because there'll be thousands of bills and not thousands of bills to get passed. And so, which is a good thing. I think it ought to be difficult. I think it ought to be hard. And so even whenever it comes to eliminating the state income tax, it still has to go through that process, and it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. And so let's be pushing and let's be praying that we can eliminate the state income tax.
So let me ask, it might be a little bit of a tough question, but I think it'll benefit our audience as well as me to ask you this question here, because you know so much about the nitty-gritty of Mississippi politics. So as I'm sure our audience is aware, Mississippi is a ruby red state. We haven't had a Democrat governor, I think, since Ronnie Musgrove 2 decades ago. We have solid Republican majorities in both houses of our state legislature. So what's the political opposition to abolishing the state income tax? Is it just that there are some Republicans who aren't on board with abolishing the state income tax? Is it a different kind of political opposition we're up against? Like, what are the real roadblocks here, Dan?
So whenever you look at the legislators in Jackson, you have in the House, you have a speaker, and the speaker is Jason White. And then in the Senate, you have a lieutenant governor, and that's Delbert Hosemann. And so the lieutenant governor is by far, whenever you look at all of the different seats in Mississippi, the lieutenant governor has a lot of power. He has a lot of control. And in the lieutenant governor, in the Senate, in the chamber, they have a lot of different committees, and they have chairmen on these committees, and those chairmen are appointed by the lieutenant governor. So whenever you have a bill that's going to come, that bill gets put into a committee that the lieutenant governor says, I want this bill goes here, this bill goes here. And typically the bills will go into whatever committee that has to do with that particular bill. And so that lieutenant governor has a lot of power. He has a lot of control on what bills get passed and what bills don't get passed. Some bills get double referred. Some bills even triple referred. And what that means is that whenever a bill is double referred, that it'll go to 2 different committees, and most of the time it is sent to 2 different committees to die. A committee will have a certain amount of people in a committee. So whenever a bill gets sent to a committee, before it can go to the House floor for debate, and before it can go to the House floor to be passed on the House floor, it first has to come out of committee. If the lieutenant governor or if the speaker does not want a bill to come out of committee, then the lieutenant governor or the speaker will say, I don't want it out of committee. And it typically won't come out of committee.
So to summarize that, we have a lieutenant governor and or a speaker who is not in favor of abolishing the state income tax, and that really hampers our ability to get this legislation passed, because the lieutenant governor has the unanimous ability to control what legislation comes into the Senate. Is that right?
Yeah, the lieutenant governor has a lot of control.
So if the lieutenant governor is not on board with abolishing the state income tax, how does it get passed?
It's not going to get passed. And so it's not, if the lieutenant governor is not for it. And so what I would like to have, Reed, is I would love to have the lieutenant governor on this show and talk about, the state income tax, and to talk about on either why it's not going to get passed or what hurdles that we need to hurdle to get it passed, is what I would like to see, is have him on the show, or even some of the state senators and state legislators, have them on the show to discuss and talk about this very thing, because I believe it is important to eliminate the state income tax for the people of Mississippi. But In order to make that happen, you have to have a lieutenant governor. You have to have a speaker who wants it done. I'm not sure about the speaker. I have heard the lieutenant governor say personally, I've heard him say that it's going to take a lot more work to get rid of the state income tax. I'm not sure if he's favor for it or against it. From what I understand, he is not for it. He is not in favor of eliminating state income tax. I would love to have him on. We can talk about it. I know the governor is for eliminating the state income tax. I've heard him say it before many times. I'm not sure even about Speaker White, if he's for it or against it. I hate to say that. I would love to have him on, and we can talk about, eliminating the state income tax, because I would love to see the state income tax eliminated, and so which I think is very important. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, Reed.
No, I think that you answered it thoroughly. I really appreciate that. I would love to have an opportunity to talk with somebody in charge on the record about why so much of my money is getting stolen out of my pocket every year. I promise to be as civil as I possibly can, Dan, but I would love to have that conversation. Let's make it happen. We can make it a big promotional thing for God and country. I think it would be phenomenal radio, and it would just be good for the people of the state.
Yeah, I would love to have, anybody is welcome on the show. I would love to have, there's not one person that I wouldn't have on, to talk about some of these very topics that I believe is important.
We should be having conversations with people
Absolutely.
While we still have the freedom to do so. Even if they're public officials with whom we don't have a good history or with whom maybe we don't agree, we should have conversations with them. I mean, you and I have always been in favor of that idea. So, let's say Bernie Sanders. I would have Bernie Sanders on the show in a heartbeat. I think it'd be entertaining. I think we would have some clear differences. I think it'd be funny as heck to watch, right? But we should have those conversations, man.
Yeah, I would love to have some of these conversations. Bernie Sanders would be, it would be amazing.
I would interview Bernie Sanders in a heartbeat. Not I wouldn't want to make him look good. We obviously don't agree with him, but that would be a conversation people would tune into. Yeah. We could make that productive and fruitful.
Yeah, I would love to have, a lot of our legislators on, and I'm for it 100%. And some of them will watch the show. Some of them watch, they watch it, they'll see it. And hey, if you would love to come on, please reach out. We'd love to have you on. And we'll talk about the state income tax. We'll talk about how a bill gets to committee, gets out of committee, how it gets to the floor, how it gets debated, and then how it goes, to the other chamber, and how it gets put into a committee there, how it gets debated, how it comes out of committee, how it gets debated on the House floor. If they make changes, it goes back to the Senate. It has to go back through the process all over again. And then whenever it comes out, and sometimes it even go to another committee, a joint committee between the House and the Senate to come out of that committee. I mean, so there's so much that goes into a bill and getting a bill passed. I would love to have one. Matter of fact, Reed, I will reach out this week to some of our legislators and see if they'll come on, the show with us. I'll reach out to them this week, and maybe we can even go to Jackson and we can record the show in Jackson. I've got some friends that have some offices there. And I know they let me set up and we can set the show up and right there in their office and have them come over and talk about, some of these issues. I think would be great. I think it would be great for the people of Mississippi to learn more, to be more informed, about how government works, how it works. Because let's not forget, whether we agree or disagree, they still work for us, right? They still are our elected officials. And I'm going to respect them. Because I might not agree with them, and I've taken a lot of flack for this, but I'm not changing who I am for anybody. I'm not changing who I am, how I treat people. In the past, I have been rude at times, and I have changed in some of that aspect. I'm not going to change who I am whenever it comes to treating people. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to be kind. I'm a Christian first, and I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican, but I'm a Christian first, and so we're going to be kind. We're going to treat people with dignity and respect. But I'm all about having conversations, and I'm all about educating the people on how government works, because government is supposed to work for us. It's not the other way around.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely well said. I think that we should have interviews with people like that. My thing is, politicians are not your friend. I think it's good to have conversations with people and power, remind them that they work for us. But politicians are not your friends, right? There's actually this thing I want to share with you a little bit later. Maybe we'll discuss it in next week's episode. Mike Rothfeld, the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership, is called FACL. He gives this absolutely fantastic presentation I would recommend to anybody in our audience, called The Real Nature of Politics, where he discusses how to engage politicians, how to talk with politicians, how to treat politicians, how to view politicians, right? So I think that maybe we'll watch that later. You'll discuss that a little bit. Maybe incorporate that into future conversations we have. But we should have those kinds of conversations while we still live in a country free enough to do so.
Absolutely. Reed, I've enjoyed the show. I've enjoyed the conversations, and I'm looking forward to January 20th, Donald Trump being inaugurated, and that's going to be a good day for America. I'm actually going to be in D.C. on January 20th, and so I'm excited, looking forward to going to the inauguration. My son and I have a couple of tickets, and so we're just pumped and thrilled, and I'm looking forward to spending time there in D.C. If you're going to be at D.C. Inauguration Day, look me up, and let's get together. Let's have a good time. Reed, thanks for being on. Obviously, I've enjoyed the show. Any last words before we get off?
No, Dan, this was awesome. Let's keep pushing. I want to see Canada become a territory. I don't think it's right that we send them all this welfare money and all this aid unless that they're going to be a part of the United States. But I don't want to see all those Canadians voting for Democrats in presidential elections any more than you do. No, fantastic episode. I've absolutely loved it. Thank you again, Dan.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already shared God and Country, I would encourage you to do so and share our Substack, share the YouTube channel, share the Facebook page, share the Twitter, share everything. We're even going to be on TikTok now. And so let's share it on TikTok. Let's share it everywhere we can. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great United States of America.